And despite all the troubles and investigations in Washington, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is confident that the White House will get tax cuts pushed through Congress by the end of the year. Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, told me on Mornings with Maria just that earlier in the week.
I have no higher priority than having tax reform done this year. I think, as I've talked about, we need to get back to sustained economic growth at 3% or higher. And to do that, we need to have tax reform, we need to have regulatory relief, and we need to have trade. And we're working every day. We're working with the House and the Senate. We're committed to get this done. There's a lot of work. There's 100 people in Treasury crunching numbers and focusing on this for us. And we're going to do everything we can possible to get it done this year.
So what does Wall Street think of that? Joining me right now is Bank of America's Global Wealth and Investment Management Division Chief Investment Officer, Chris Hyzy, is with us. Chris, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet, Maria. Good to see you.
First, a monster deal announced Friday, Amazon acquiring Whole Foods. Your thoughts on this deal, what it tells us about this space or about the level of mergers and acquisitions in terms of the impact on markets?
Well, it tells you a few things. I think the biggest thing it tells you in a full microcosm is we're going to continue to see this kind of M&A activity from a variety of different players that we like to call diagonal disruption. And that's the ability to shorten the supply chain. That's the ability to take execution up a notch as it relates to the speed to acquire whatever it is that people need today. And diagonal disruption is using technology in one particular area and then going into something like a staple, which is what you've seen with this example. It lowers the supply chain, as we said before. It keeps a lid on prices, and it's also feeding into this whole dynamic around the world where you get easy financial conditions, you've got high cash acquisitions, you've got liquidity that's omnipresent all around the world, and at the same time, you actually are potentially going to see lower prices.
Yeah, so I guess lower prices is one positive from this deal. Do you think more M&A is a positive for the stock market, Chris? What's the impact on the broader market?
Well, when you get stock markets like this, and not just in the United States, but even some other parts of the world that are close to or at all-time highs, you've got two things going for you as an acquirer. You've got a high currency in terms of your stock price, but you also have been able to build up a lot of cash recently because of low interest rates, particularly as you've been able to bring debt onto the equation, onto the balance sheet, onto the capital structure. You get low rates, you get high cash, you get a high currency, you get higher M&A activity. So that bodes well for a lot of those companies that are looking to get into spaces they couldn't before or acquire a smaller disruptor to use that technology to expand their base widely in the years to come.
All right, that was such a big deal when I first saw it. I thought, wow, they are really going up against Walmart in a huge way. This is a serious competition in all categories. Let me move on to the broader market and the impact of tax reform, healthcare reform, Chris. Here we are now close to the end of June. We still have not had healthcare legislation nor tax reform. We're waiting on both. Do you think lawmakers will be able to do this year?
You know, most policy watchers that have been pretty accurate in the past few cycles are suggesting that, you know, a vote's coming very soon on repeal and replace as it relates to health care reform, potentially as soon as the next couple of months, and certainly up ahead of September is what they're saying. That would put the base in place to potentially do tax reform by the end of the year. With a lot of disruption going on in terms of what's going on in the political scene, it looks like it's going to be difficult to do all of that by the end of the year. The markets are looking away from that right now for one specific reason. You've got easy financial conditions, and if you had to add a second one, Maria, as we've all seen, the profit cycle continues to gather momentum. We expect very good earnings growth in the second quarter, and easy financial conditions, low inflation, low rates, good profit cycle helps a variety of asset classes, specifically equities.